A reminder that audience members can submit questions to our panelists through the Q&A function. The session, is also being recorded and closed captioning access is available. As I mentioned, today's session is titled FAFSA Changes. The long-awaited rollout of the new and simplified free application for federal student aid, known as FAFSA, has been a mess. Students were delayed in being able to apply, creating a chain reaction of delayed requests to campuses, which then were stalled in making offers to students. What will be the trickle-down effects of lower enrollment, fewer low-income students, and even fewer trained graduates coming out of college? We'll explore those issues in that discussion today. With me are Tricia Stouter, Senior Assistant Director in the Office of Student Financial Aid at Iowa State University. She's worked in a variety of roles related to college and career readiness. In her current role, she oversees programs designed to assist Iowa State students in pursuing their education and professional goals. Welcome, Tricia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Brenda Bazinski, Assistant Provost and Director of Student Financial Aid at the University of Iowa. Brenda has more than 30 years of experience in the development and oversight of financial aid programs, policies, and initiatives to promote retention and student achievement. Welcome, Brenda. Thank you for being here.
Sure. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Josh Kite is Associate Vice President of Enrollment and Dean of Admission at Coe College in Cedar Rapids. Josh has worked in higher education for 15 years and specialized in enrollment management, financial aid, and student retention strategies. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, Tom.
We also have David Ford, Bureau Chief at the Iowa Department of Education, where he oversees Iowa College Aid's operations for state scholarships and grant programs, as well as community engagement programs like Gear Up Iowa, AmeriCorps, and the local College Access Network. Previously, he served as a Director of Post-Secondary Readiness and Equity Partnership for Iowa's education agencies. His experience also includes serving as a school counselor and instructor in various graduate programs. Welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Again, a reminder that questions for our panelists can be submitted through the Q&A function. So just a bit of background, kind of an introduction to this discussion. A new version of the federal student aid application known as the FAFSA was rolled out late last year. The new free application for federal student aid was designed to make it easier for students and parents to apply and to make more of them eligible for funding. The FAFSA form is typically accessible to students on October 1st of each year to allow ample time to submit financial information before state and school-specific deadlines for aid eligibility. However, due to incomplete planning measures, the U.S. Department of Education released last year's version about 3 months late, drastically condensing the time frame for families to submit their applications for aid. Students and families experience limited availability and glitches during a soft launch. The relaunch brings major changes such as fewer questions, the ability to list more colleges and availability in more languages. However, the update means students will get their financial aid offers later than usual. And to make matters worse, the late rollout came with additional changes, including changes that could reduce or eliminate access to need-based student aid for farm families and small business owners. Tricia, I want to start this off with you. Give us a little bit more kind of background here. How does the FAFSA work, and what are the key changes to the new student aid application form?
Yeah. So typically in a typical year prior to this launch, the FAFSA really works to collect asset and tax related information from the student and their family so that institutions can use that information to determine eligibility for federal, institutional, and state-based aid. So this really allows us to get a picture of the financial means of the student and what they can afford according to a formula based on the federal government. This, as you mentioned, typically is happening, you know, in the fall of the senior semester if they're a straight from high school student. And that information allows, you know, the student or the schools to decide which scholarship students are eligible to apply for and things like that. Now, the big change and kind of the reason why things were changed was this has been sort of a complicated process for families. And so the overarching goal of this was to make it easier for families. So it was based on this premise of simplifying and asking fewer questions that we could get the answers to through other means, different tax fields, things like that. So that was sort of the goal. And then there was also a formula change. So the formula, instead of looking at what used to historically be called the expected family contribution, it now shifted to what's called the student aid index. So there's some calculation changes behind it, but essentially that number is still what's used to calculate what the federal government determines as need, and then allowing the schools to take that information. That the changes went into effect for the 24-25 school year. So really last fall and winter for the class that just began this fall. And it ended up launching sort of in a staggered rollout beginning at the very end of December as opposed to October. So it was sort of a delay as well as some calculation changes behind all of those things.
Great, thank you for that. Brenda, what's the latest on the 2025-26 FAFSA form? When is it expected to be available, and will it have any major changes from the previous year's version?
Okay, the form will be available starting December 1, 2024 for students to complete their 25-26 FAFSA form. This will be, and that's for all students. Now, I should share that there is some beta testing going on in different parts of the US. And so it is possible that a student could receive an email asking them to complete the actual 25-26 FAFSA form and send their results in, and schools will receive that, but that is all still in a testing phase. So students are being, I'll just say, recruited to do that. It's not real prevalent in Iowa. I don't know any Iowa school that is participating in that, but there are some schools in Wisconsin and particularly in the East and West Coast. So just in case there's a student out there that received an email and said, please complete the FAFSA. So, and this whole 4 rounds of beta testing is what's new and different going forward, in that the federal student aid, they are trying to do, I would say, more focused, targeted testing in order to try to help ensure the form is going to be successfully rolled out on December 1.
Do you know, can you elaborate as to how the U.S. Department of Education is working to, I guess, improve the FAFSA experience and address some of the problems that plagued the initial rollout?
Sure. What they're really not changing any of the questions that are going to be asked, but what they are doing is editing and adding more context to the explanation in the directions of what they are attempting to ask for. So they're trying to be more clear about their directions, but due to time and probably resources, they're really just rolling forward the existing form into 25-26 and trying to enhance the user experience by having additional directions, guidance with the form. There is also a parent wizard that they can utilize to help determine which parent should be the one providing their information on the FAFSA form. And this is all online with obtaining, and every student who files, as well as their parent contributor, needs to have an FSA ID And so if someone is filing for the first time, they should go online and obtain that now, so they are ready when December 1 rolls around. And another slight change is if a parent didn't have a social security number, they should still now be able to go to obtain their FSA ID. They should be able to still obtain that.
And for those who might not be familiar, what is an FSA ID?
It's a federal student aid ID. It's basically your number, your identification, and it stays with you basically forever. And that's what you use to go on to access your information. You want to go revisit your form, look at your dashboard, find out anything that you did out there. It is your ID. Everyone should maintain that ID in confidence and don't lose it. And remember what that ID number is, because I have one from 10 years ago and I can still go on and use it to access information.
All right. Josh, what issues and challenges have the FAFSA changes created for Iowa students, families, colleges, and universities? What changes has Coe College had to make a result? How has the college adjusted and adapted?
Yeah, I think to your point at the beginning, the first major change was the delay, of course, in providing financial aid offers. And so we also understand how big of a part that the financial decision is when students are navigating that college search process with their families. And so the groups that we are seeing that had the highest impact, and you mentioned those before as well, are definitely the families of the highest need, not only in the state of Iowa, but across the country, and co-serves a large majority of different states in the country. The big part too is many families that of the highest need, when they're looking at their financial aid offer, when they're looking at the financial aid picture, they're seeing what the total cost of attendance of for any institution that you're looking at. So what we would call like the sticker price, right? The direct cost of tuition, room and board, and student fees. Then they would subtract their merit-based aid based off of their academic profile, GPA, ACT score, SAT score. And then when they do that fast math, there's still a gap, right? Depending on what institution you're looking at. And so the financial component, when you're able to file the free application for federal student aid, that's when it opens up a lot of other opportunities, such as the Iowa tuition grant, which is $8,500 for families that have a specific SAI, and also the federal Pell Grant. And so this last year, families weren't able to see a very large component, sometimes up to $15,000 in additional aid that they may not think would be available to them. And so what we did see, not just at Coe, but even talking with colleagues across the states and across the country, is many families kind of just put their hands up in the air and said, you know, maybe we'll just take a semester off or a year off, just based off of concern, frustration, anxiousness, which is totally understandable. And so to your second point of your question, Tom, in regards to what Coe has done, so this year we are creating early financial aid estimates to try to help as much as possible to provide families that are interested in Coe to see what the bottom line would be after any scholarships, institutional need-based aid, et cetera. But we also, late last spring, because of the delayed rollout, we launched Iowa Ready, which was for all admitted Iowan students a cap of their direct costs, essentially so they would know the max that they would pay without being able to see a financial aid offer. And we also rolled that out this fall as well for Iowan families.
But how does that cap work, or how is that structured?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for this year particularly, we are capping the direct cost for families. So after tuition, room and board, and student fees is $24,000 to Iowans that are admitted. So we tell any family, regardless of your SAI or family situation, you will not pay more than $24,000 a year to attend Coe this fall. But I will say many families that are admitted will pay much less than that because of the aforementioned Iowa tuition grant, any federal Pell Grants that they would see based off those early estimates that we would create for them.
So how is the college going about, I guess, creating or calculating these estimates, given the delays in information that institutions are receiving from from the Department of Education?
That's a great question. So there's a federal aid, student aid index calculator where families are able to submit their information from 2023, any of all their tax income information, and then that would provide an estimated SAI, that estimated student aid index. And then they would provide that to us, and based off that index that they provided, we would create a financial aid offer for them based off that. Again, these are all estimates, which we're very transparent about, because we would want to make sure that all the families would also have to submit the official free application for federal student aid when that does become available in December.
Okay. I guess, can you talk about how well, I guess, that process is going, and any idea how closely those estimates align to maybe what the true, financial need is for these students and their families?
Yeah, early indications are really positive. I will also say we did something very similar towards the tail end of spring, summer this last recruitment year. And those SAI forms that were submitted based off what the families submitted were very accurate. Again, we're still in the early stages, but we do have a good amount of students and families that have submitted that information. And again, this is just code doing our part, trying to help as much as possible in the promoting financial literacy is also very, very important, making sure families truly understand. Co-specifically, we serve a very high percentage of first-gen families, a lot of Iowans as well, and so we want to make sure we can help provide as much information as we possibly can during that search.
All right. I also want to bring Tricia and Brenda into this conversation, and then David, hope to get to you to provide a broader statewide perspective. But Tricia and Brenda, I guess, kind of same question. How have the changes impacted students and the families that you're working with at Iowa State and the University of Iowa, and what changes have the universities had to make as a result? I don't know, Brenda, do you want to start?
Sure. Yes, we had to make some changes, Tom. First of all, our students are our top priority. That is our focus here and what we do. And so in order to help students through this tumultuous year, what we worked March and April, we didn't receive results until mid-March, and we were able to provide financial aid offers on April 16th. So we did all we could to get those offers out early, and we individually helped students throughout the summer who were facing challenges with getting the form completed, whether it be no social security number, just unique family situations. Then what we did this fall is we still had some students who were not able to have their forms successfully completed or actually processed by FPS. We worked collaboratively with our billing office, and they were willing to not charge any late fees, make sure those students don't incur any extra fees or expense, because due to no fault of their own, the form hadn't been completely processed correctly. There were still glitches with the system. So we worked very closely with families, with our billing office, and make sure to allow the proper amount of time for those families. So that's something unique that we did this year that we haven't had to do in previous years. I would say, along with probably Tricia and Kite, all of our offices had to do additional things to help families, students complete the forms, get their offers, answer a lot of questions for them. I'm sure we were all inundated with emails and phone calls to help students navigate this process. For some, it was very clumsy, not streamlined. And I believe Josh commented too, there were some that just plain gave up because it was such an awkward situation and very, not helpful for families, very frustrating. So anyway, we've done well through it. I think most schools in Iowa, but there are others throughout the U.S. that have not.
Tricia?
Yeah, so very much echoing what Brenda and Josh have said, in that our goal through this transition was to truly come alongside our students and families that were struggling, because we also didn't have the answers. And so oftentimes we're seen as sort of the experts in the room, and we were also struggling to get answers. And so it was a lot of let's figure this out together. And so we did a lot of very high touch advising and meeting with students and prospective students and families through the process. We also flipped our scholarship awarding process a little bit. We do sort of a centralized scholarship application process, and we typically wait until we have all of the financial aid information to start awarding those. We took a pretty critical look at which of our scholarships are truly dependent upon financial need information and which ones are not, so that we could proactively review and award the ones that were not reliant upon that information, so that when we did get the financial information that was needed, we could turn that around quicker for an award letter and for that financial aid offer. So then that way students didn't have as big of a delay. We were pretty committed to making sure that when students got their financial aid offer, that it was a complete financial aid offer. We didn't want to give them a partial and have them feel some of that angst of, well, is there more coming? Is there not those kind of things, and that back and forth. So we delayed and had to adjust our timeline so that we could give students the best picture that we could. And that we talk a lot about how that impacts incoming students because they're making these decisions for the first time, but that also trickled down to impact our transfer population as well as our returning student population as well, because the whole process was pushed back. And so we have really seen a big intake, or a big increase, in our advising and phone call and email traffic this fall, as students are trying to still sort through and navigate what that looks like. And for us, sort of one of the lingering issues is our students that did file those paper FAFSAs. So because of some complexity in the FAFSA filing process, their best bet was to file a paper one. And we still have not received all of our paper FAFSAs. And so there are still students who, almost 2 months after classes have begun, we still do not have the financial aid information needed to award those students correctly based on federal information. And so we're really making sure that we're coming alongside those students and, doing what we can to support them with institutional aid until we have federal aid and things like that, that till we know what they're eligible for. It is sort of a complicated process that we're working through, and for a lot of our students and families, it was they could actually talk to a person in our office and connect with somebody versus waiting on phone calls and phone queues with the Department of Ed and things like that. And so a lot of it was, I worked with Trisha during this, and so Trisha's my person and I'm sticking with her. And so that's, a pretty high value for us as relationships. And we tried to model that through this difficulty time.
David, I want to bring you into this conversation. I guess, what are you seeing from a broader statewide perspective? What do FAFSA completion rates look like statewide? How is this impacting state aid programs?
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll kind of give the broad overview here, and certainly the efforts that they've shared that are happening at the institutional level is why we're at where we are. In the grander scheme of things, we fared pretty well as a state, comparatively speaking. So nationally, high school seniors were down 9%. As of the end of September, we were down 2.2% for high school seniors FAFSA completion year over year, which is not a trend that we would like to see going down. But considering all things considered, take that as a small win. And I think that was attributed to everyone in the financial aid, higher ed, college access community across the state. We've got state programs, we've got institutional programs, college access partners. There's a whole host of things that that helped ensure that. And I think what I wrote down here in the note is that that community really just went into overdrive. I've lived through the derecho and a couple of other things here, and boy, when the community in Iowa decides that they're going to fix something that happened to them, they do it with a lot of gumption. So and I think so. There's some positives through the individual challenges for sure. We did see so we're like I said, we're down 2.2% from where we were last year for high school seniors. But this summer, there were a number of efforts to kind of address we were very far down probably back in May, and I think that's what really put the institutions in a bind was they didn't have information to be able to package students. And probably to some people's chagrin, we accelerated the FAFSA completion rate, which brought in a lot of data into the institutions late in the game, probably June, July, and August. From May 6th to mid-September, we processed approximately 56,000 FAFSAs during that time as a state, which is exponentially higher than what we would have processed during that same time last year. I think some challenges for us is that led to some of that success. We were actively planning for this as a state agency for a very long time. Our team has built a long list of predictive models to look at various things. And obviously the changes in this disrupted that model, but we had things in place so that, I think generally that FAFSA opens October 1. We're providing awarding parameters for state aid programs. Usually at the end of May, it's contingent upon the legislature and when the appropriations get assigned. It's usually a 7 to 8 month turnaround from when the FAFSA opens to when we provide those. And because of when it came out this year, our team was able to put that out in 3 months and provide a fairly similar timeline to when we provided those in years past. So again, I think that there were some things that we did that were strong. I think some of the data points that we've started to see, and I know that this maybe doesn't necessarily feel this way. We are seeing the regions reported an increase in enrollment across the state. The community colleges have seen a net overall increase in their enrollment. We've seen in the media record levels of enrollment at some of our private institutions. And I think a lot of that is the direct result of the efforts that the institutions made to fix this, to patch the holes that surfaced through this process. And I can share some of the information on community college alone. So not only is that enrollment up, but it's up across all racial and ethnic groups. It is up across students who come from low-income households. It is up across students with disabilities, and it's flat for students who are English learners. So again, a lot more of those populations that we know struggle with the FAFSA process. There were a lot of targeted efforts to address that, right? So the results of those efforts are starting to bear through. So I think with that same amount of effort this next year, I think we're all keeping our fingers crossed that December 1st will come and go without a lot of fanfare.
So I appreciate you providing kind of that breakdown of information for the community colleges. I guess, are you seeing something similar when it pertains to Iowa's public universities or private institutions?
We don't have that information just yet. We have an enrollment report that we institutions provide. Those are usually due around the early middle part of November, so we'll have that soon. But I mean, certainly Josh could share about. I'm not sure how that looks where they are, but for the Regents universities, similar numbers. But again, they don't apply. You look at a statewide average, like a lot of that can be driven by a couple of institutions or specific programs, and those numbers don't hold true for every institution, every campus.
Yeah. Josh, I'm curious, as we're talking about enrollment, I guess, what impacts have these changes had on enrollment in specific student groups, maybe especially first generation students and those from underrepresented communities there at Co?
Yeah, great question. And David kind of touched on a little bit too, with the state of Iowa being down 2% and the nation being down 9%, shows that us Iowans definitely rolled our sleeves up and got to work, and especially with the financial aid office here at Co. I think if you ever see a financial aid professional these days, please buy them a cup of coffee or whatever beverage they would like, because I have never seen specifically for Cohen, also talking to very close colleagues, how much work did go into everything this last year. And they did it, sometimes it wasn't the easiest work, but at the end of the day, the charge and the mission we have in higher ed, very selfless humans that want to just help students. And I saw that every single day I walked on campus. And so when you talk a little bit about what David mentioned about just the FAFSA submission rates, and as well as when I mentioned who co-serves, right? And so we had 31 different states represented in this last class. And so when you look at Iowa specifically, the FAFSA submissions were pretty flat. They were down, and that correlates exactly where with the enrollment for the entering class was too. Few students down, but pretty flat. In that, where we did see the biggest drop in our FAFSA submissions were non-contiguous states, and there are states that definitely did not perform as well as the state of Iowa did in this, and that definitely did have an impact on visits and FAFSA submissions and that work too. So hopefully, as we roll this out with our early estimates co-specifically and with December 1 coming soon, we'll be able to help provide as much information as possible on a family's college search. The other thing I do want to mention too is there's a new phrase of like the non-consumption group, right? And so you have many students that are just not electing to go to college across the country and in the state of Iowa. And so right now it's too early to tell. Is that because of the FAFSA delays? Is that because of other things at play here? And I think time will tell, but we are watching that very, very closely as we move forward.
Tricia, Brenda, what are you guys seeing on your campuses related to enrollment?
Yeah, so Iowa State's undergraduate enrollment was up this year. So we were fortunate to kind of have navigated, I don't want to call it the storm, but the storm of FAFSA simplification and come out with a larger class than previous. We did see quite a few less FAFSA filers from, time and point from this year to last year. And so we have fewer students that did file the FAFSA, but our overall class grew. But we also have more first generation students than we did last year. We also have more Pell eligible students than we did the year before. So I think, we have a lot of outreach programs and things like that connected to Iowa State. And I think that, FAFSA simplification was really hot on everybody's mind last year. And I think that that's a testament to the work that these organizations did, as well as ICANN and things like that, to really support these populations that we know maybe have historically struggled with the FAFSA. I also think, we know that this was maybe not the best rollout that could have occurred, but it was a simpler process for some students. Some of our students and families reported that it took them 10 minutes. And for students that was their experience, that was a wonderful change for them. That was not necessarily everybody's experience, but we did see, overall growth at the university. We saw growth in some of those targeted populations. I think to Josh's point is it's too soon to tell of what does that look like with indebtedness and borrowing. Now so far, again, this time of a year compared to last, we have seen fewer students with private loans and things like that. And so we don't know what that will look like as the student finishes their degrees or finishes their academic year. But we're really trying to do a lot of education with students that are using different methods to pay for school, since we do have fewer FAFSA filers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tom, I'll just say that likewise, we are up in enrollment. We had a great class. We had the third largest incoming class at Iowa this fall. And I would attribute a lot of that to just the persistence of kind of all hands on deck, helping with getting the FAFSA form completed. And a shout out to ICANN. They were very helpful throughout the state of Iowa.
And ICANN being the Iowa College Access Network?
Yes.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. They were pivotal, I think, in helping a lot of high school seniors perhaps get the form completed. We also have financial aid literacy, educational programs, just like Iowa State does also, and UNI. And, we work year round helping students understand the different nuances of financial aid and what's available. but we were very fortunate, I think, with the outcome this year, given the upheaval that was occurring all March, April, May. And we're grateful to also our students, parents who were patient. This took a lot of time and energy on everyone's part. And thanks for the shout out, Josh, to the financial aid professionals. It was quite a year.
Yeah. So I'll just toss this out to the group. I guess, what issues and concerns remain about the FAFSA changes? I guess, what are the biggest barriers and obstacles that students and institutions are now grappling with when it comes to awarding financial aid?
Yeah, I would say we're still pretty concerned about paper FAFSA filers. That's a population and that still has not received the information and the support that they are entitled to. And so that's a population that we're very mindful of. And because there haven't been changes in some of the process, we're also concerned about what that looks like for 25-26. And so trying to watch that group as they migrate through our processes, for sure.
One thing that I would add to that, I think I was going to identify exactly that, the paper filers, huge issue, and still an ongoing one, and something that we are regularly paying attention to. How do we address that? I think the focus seems to have turned on, we've got to get 25-26 right, but we haven't tied off 24-25 just yet. So balancing those two things out. I think some things that we can anticipate that might change for this coming year is that, I think, as Brenda mentioned, this beta testing process, that was certainly a miss last year to not have some sort of a process embedded. And I think everybody widely across the field acknowledges that. So I think that will probably be helpful. And we've already heard that we do have some ICERs that have come into, those are the student records that have come into the state. So we know that those things are happening. So we know that then more information will be coming on those. Another thing that I think is a positive, because of the way that the process was redesigned, there's a process called income verification selection, that if there's a number of things that kind of trigger that, but we have seen a statewide decrease on the number of families who are selected for that process, drop from 30,000 students 4 years ago to 400 this past year. And that is a fairly significant process that a family is asked to go through. So we're seeing major decreases in that. And those were largely targeted to people who are struggling to get through the process anyway. So I think that there are some things that we hope will help smooth the edges as we go into this upcoming year. And again, I think we're all just keeping our fingers crossed that the thing is good.
Yeah. Brenda, in our discussion prior to this panel, you were talking about issues that you were dealing with at the University of Iowa related to, I guess, incorrect data coming from the Department of Education, and I guess either incorrect or incomplete. And can you talk about the issues you were dealing with that and getting, I guess, maybe corrected or updated information?
Sure. So for example, data integrity is critical, and it's great that they've reduced the individual selected for verification. But I think what you have to understand here is there's a shift. Instead of the Department of Education randomly selecting students for verification, they're shifting that onus to the schools. They want us to now decide, is that FAFSA really correct? Did this make sense? So many schools are kind of having to pivot and adapt, and I learn and review their data to decide, is this something we should be double checking or taking a second look at? Because our students understanding how to even answer this question. There were some changes to the form about, for example, will your parents help you contribute towards college? Well, many students want to check, no, they won't. But that resulted in a lot of students then only qualifying for what's called an unsubsidized loan. And this is all erroneous. This is not correct. Maybe the parents aren't helping, but the students still needed to answer yes and provide parental information. So that resulted in schools going, look at all these students who said parents that they're on their own. They're now only qualifying for an unsubsidized loan. That's not correct. So we had to reach back out to the families and discuss and reconfirm, is this what you really intended here? Because you're only going to qualify for an unsubsidized loan. And probably in 95% of those cases, it was, no, I need my Pell Grant again. I need my subsidized loan. My parents can't help me, but the question was worded so poorly that it led to confusion on filling out the form. So again, that's where that was a large issue across the US for students, parents, schools, and schools really had to learn how to review their data, adapt, pivot, develop workarounds, identify where maybe students got confused or were unclear about how to answer this, and then reach back out to families to reconfirm or actually obtain the correct information. And I would be very confident to say that this was across the board. I'm sure at Co-College, Iowa State, they also reached out to families and said, is this what you really meant? Or let's revisit this. So we're getting there. It's really up to the schools, I would like to say, that we have to adjust and learn how to get this right, because it was such a tumultuous and quick turnaround year for FSA. They couldn't get it all done. It was a daunting task, and therefore schools have to resolve the issues. And we developed workarounds where, yes, we maybe got your results, but no student aid index was calculated, no SAI number. It just came in blank. Well, we have a tool, as most schools probably do, where they could determine what that SAI number really is, because FSA couldn't determine it. So many schools are doing the work that probably are supposed to be done at FSA, but we're having to do it. So, but those are things we're all learning, adjusting, and doing what we have to do to make sure we can get that student offered financial aid.
Right. Again, just a reminder, if you have questions for our panelists, please submit them in the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll get to as many of those as our time allows. As I mentioned earlier, the new FAFSA form included a new asset calculation that changed the farm family's expected annual contribution to their child's education from, I think, around $7,600 to about $41,000. Iowa U.S. Senator Joni Ernst has introduced a bipartisan bill that would restore an exemption for certain family farms and small businesses under the FAFSA. Tricia, being at Iowa State University, science and ag, big focuses there. How have those changes in the federal student aid formula affected children of parents who run family farms or small businesses? Are those students just deciding not to attend college this year because of these the newly imposed asset calculation?
I think it's too early to tell in some of those populations. What we knew that the exemption for farm families was going to impact our students, as well as the small business owner calculation. And so I think we'll know more, when we look at our year over year enrollment information, but it is something that we would expect and encourage Iowans to reach out to their representatives to encourage this to be reviewed because it is impacting those families. We were, again, proactive in working with our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences teams to try to explain what the change was to families and to engage them in that. We also we're pretty fortunate in that our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences has some college-specific funding that they could do to really increase. They could utilize that to increase some institutional aid that students were maybe receiving. But we won't know until, probably I'd say spring semester what the true impact is. It is certainly something that was maybe an unintended consequence of the FAFSA simplification, but the way that questions were worded in the FAFSA previously makes it also difficult to pull out that population from previous years to this year. So we can't go one for one and say, hey, you qualified for this based on this last year. Let's talk about how we can navigate it this year. And so it's just we're working pretty hard to be blanket in our approach of there is a change. This is why. We also utilize a process in financial aid called special conditions or professional judgment, and encouraging students and families to utilize that if there are one-time income pieces that came in, and that is beyond just our small business and our agricultural community. That the special conditions and professional judgment does not supersede or fix the missed exemption or anything like that. It just allows us to take a look at if there are one-time circumstances or things that have changed in somebody's financial picture from prior year. Because again, we're working off of tax information that's, a year and a half old by the point that we're receiving the ICER or the FAFSA information. And so really we have seen a pretty big increase in the number of families that are using the special conditions or professional judgment process because there's been changes to their financial picture from the time that they filed to now.
All right. Brenda, in addition, I understand that the Federal Financial Aid Forum used to give a break to families with 2 or more children in college at the time. I understand that's now gone. Are schools, I guess, able to fill that gap? And how has that changed the aid their children receive? Do they still qualify for need-based aid, which includes work-study jobs and subsidized loan funds?
Great question, Tom, and you are bringing up a great point. These families probably saw the most significant change as far as in their eligibility for need-based financial aid. And I do want to give a shout out to our Iowa elected officials in DC who are paying attention to this issue, and I think wanting to elevate the importance of some of these changes aren't necessarily quite right or still need some fine tuning and adjustments. But what you're getting at is a family with 2 in college at the same time. If the family's expected contribution, let's say, is $10,000, it's $5,000 per child. And that would have been in last year, and the year before, etc. For the 24-25 year, that $10,000 for 2 children in college is $10,000 per child. So in essence, the family contribution is now $20,000 a total. So we too, like many schools, I felt like the rug was kind of pulled out from families halfway through college, especially your sophomores, your juniors, who maybe had received a certain aid package the previous year. So we did look at who had a significant change in their aid offer from last year to this year. We did try to look closely at some of those situations and see if we could help those families transition due to this new formula and new change. If we could find or identify some one-time funds to maybe help them bridge and get through this significant year of 24-25 of all of a sudden a huge and dramatic change. So it's a matter of working closely with families, as Tricia stated, and as they can do at CO with Josh. Every family has the opportunity to submit or inquire or ask their financial aid office about a professional judgment situation, a unique or special circumstance. And we can look at things. If things have changed or they're not the same as they were in 2022, which is the year of the tax return that this information, this financial aid offer is based on. And I just want to mention, I do think families should check studentaid.gov. That is the website to go for your FSA ID and to look at additional information there. So.
All right. You alluded to this. I understand that you met with staff from Iowa U.S. Senator Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley's offices to discuss the challenges and delays with the FAFSA process. I'm curious, I guess, what did their offices have to say about how Congress and their offices, are working to create, I guess, a more equitable, less complicated system for determining financial aid?
Yes. First of all, I applaud and was impressed with their interest and with their desire to want to help Iowans, Iowa families, and across the U.S., especially families maybe who farm or have small businesses, because the formula is now asking families to report the net worth of these farms, businesses, and in the past they did not. And as we all know, a farm isn't exactly a liquid asset that you can just go sell 2 acres to pay for college. So they're very interested in, I think, connecting with the Department of Education about how can we better have a formula to more accurately reflect a family's ability to pay or contribute to college. So these are all decisions in DC, and they are working closely with the Department of Education. And that's where I think they've got a concerted effort to want to enhance or make improvements to that, to better assess what is a family's ability to pay. So,
Just to clarify one thing. So currently, the current calculation has them report their net worth or their net assets, whereas before families just reported income, correct?
Yes, basically we were looking only at your adjusted gross income, and of course some of your net worth, savings, cash, checking accounts, things of that nature. So this is new to now have to report this value.
Right. So before it was just you reported the income that you were generating or receiving from just, let's say, a $1 million farm. Now you're reporting the total net worth of that farm.
Correct.
Yep. Previously, if it had fewer than 100 employees, they were exempt from that. So that was that threshold change, and that is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying that. So I guess, Brenda touched on this a little bit. I guess I'll just kind of broaden this to the group. I guess what policy changes or improvements are needed to address the challenges that we're seeing right now in the FAFSA process? I mean, are there any other policy changes or improvements needed just, beyond this issue of the asset calculation for farm families and small businesses?
Yeah, I'll comment briefly. First of all, I think it is, but has to be a bipartisan effort. And I think what the Department of Education holistically has to take a comprehensive review of this and review the formula. As Tricia kind of commented, it's a little early to tell significantly all the impact of the current changes that are in place, but they need to look at also, what families are having to report. Is this realistic? And let's look at enrollment impact. I know there are other states in the US that are seeing drops in enrollment. So I think, we've got our good Midwest values here, and we're going to forge ahead. And we are seeing families maybe make other sacrifices in order that their child can go to college. But we need to see, I think, enhancements to policy. But as you've mentioned too, there's been the GAO reports that really highlight the importance of improving technical expertise and also leadership. So, much improvement lies ahead, not only with the form, the formula, the process, and the cycle and things we have to do, but the overall methodology utilized to determine a family's ability to pay probably needs more research, a more thorough look in depth at the impact it had, and what can we do to make it better in the future.
All right.
I would add, if I could piggyback on that, Brenda, is from a policy standpoint, it is absolutely a bipartisan issue. It is a national issue. I think higher ed has long been seen as an individual benefit to an individual, and it is clearly a collective benefit. Almost every state has some sort of educational attainment goal. And if we have policies that are in putting barriers in front of students, we're putting things in place that are counter to the policy agenda of both parties and in virtually every state. So if we know that we need more people who have credentials and attainment, and their families are saying financing that is the number one barrier, the technical tool to get there that's causing problems has got to be the highest priority. It really is it seems that we need to disentangle why the policy agenda is not supported by the actual effort, right? So in this case, if we're trying to get more students to go into and complete some form of post-secondary education, and the number one thing that they need to complete it is getting in the way. I think Brenda had mentioned, like, what is the technical expertise? Are there enough people in the call center? Do we have enough people who are putting this together in a way that works for students and families and institutions to allow us to deliver on those policy expectations of increasing post-secondary attainment levels across the country and in here in Iowa, for sure.
All right. Well, unfortunately, our time is winding short here. I want to thank our panelists, Tricia Stouter, Brenda Bazinski, Josh Kite, David Ford. Thank you to our audience for your interest, and thank you again to our sponsor, ITC Midwest. Up next in our higher education policy track at 1:55 p.m., uncertain enrollment. An enrollment cliff is looming, with a birth date decline manifesting in fewer high school graduates in coming years. While Iowa's population remains on track to do better than some regionally, the state won't be spared entirely, especially given Illinois, a key supplier of out-of-state students to Iowa's region universities, could be among the hardest hit. And then at 4 o'clock, don't miss an exclusive live interview with former Saturday Night Live head writer and Iowa native Harper Steele. Iowa City was one of the many stops for Steele and longtime friend Will Ferrell as they documented their cross-country journey in the newly released Netflix documentary, Will and Harper. Gazette reporter Elijah Decius will be interviewing Harper for that live keynote. Again, that is today at 4 p.m. I'm Tom Barton. Again, thank you all for attending, and thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate the discussion. Hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.